Hello, and thanks for joining us today for Germination Strategy Session webinar. I'm Julie Deering and serve as the editor of Germination. In the November issue of the magazine, we focused on how to be in the know when it comes to changing industry trends and the shifting crop landscape. And one of the ways our experts said to be in the know was to be aware of what's happening at the local level and what customers want. That's why today we are honing in on what farmers want their ag retailers to know. But before we get started, I'd like to first thank our sponsors for their generous support: Bayer CropScience, Canterra Seeds, FP Genetics, SeCan, Syngenta, and 2020 Seed Labs. A few items to note: this webinar is being recorded and will be available on germination.ca, as well as turned into a podcast available on iTunes. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box and I'll make sure they get addressed at the Q&A session toward the end. Here's a quick rundown of what to expect for today. First, we'll hear from Kristen McLean, who will share results from a survey that dives into what farmers want their ag retailers to know. Then we'll open it up for questions and end with a few closing remarks. Today, our featured speaker is Kristen McLean. She serves as project manager for Stratus Ag Research, where she uses data to help break down misconceptions and help build a story that companies can put to use. Krista received her bachelor's in agriculture from the University of Saskatchewan and upon graduation joined Cargill Animal Nutrition in Lethbridge, Alberta. The feed business took her across Western Canada and down to California. Then, in 2007, she transferred business units and joined Ag Horizons, the grain handling and crop input retail business in Canada for Cargill. She spent 5 years working as a marketing specialist with various teams across the business unit before joining Stratus Ag Research. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Krista, who will share her insight as to what farmers want.
Thank you, Julie. I will do my best to try and shed some light on what farmers want their ag retailer to know. So the study today that I'm going to share with you is our study called Channel Power. And it's a study that we do across 5 different geographies across North America. So in 2015, we interviewed just over 2,700 North American farmers about their relationships with ag retailers. I'm going to share with you today some of the results out of the study that we conducted in both Western Canada and Eastern Canada. So as you can see, we've got 801 farmers that participated in our study in Western Canada and 301 that participated across Ontario and Quebec. So the first thing, a couple points I want to make and draw attention to is we're going to talk about what's important to farmers when they're choosing an ag retailer to support, but not all farmers are alike, and so we're also going to delve into a little bit about how farmers differ in what's important to them, and also maybe some unique differences between Western Canada and Eastern Canada. So this is an attribute importance chart, and on the left-hand side are the shortened, abbreviated form of a number of attributes that we present to farmers. What we do is we present these attributes 4 at a time, and we ask farmers to tell us what's most important to you and what's least important to you when you're choosing an ag retailer to support. Repeat that many times, and what we get is then really a forced ranking of what is important to farmers when they're choosing an ag retailer to support. So number 1 and number 2, this is Western Canada. I'm going to touch base on Eastern Canada in a minute. But from Western Canada, number 1 and number 2, what's most important is that retailers offer good prices and that products are available when they need them. That's of utmost importance to them. Number 3, coming in very kind of right in behind there, though, is people they know and trust at the retail location. So you've got to have the product, you've got to have it at a good price for them, but they also want it from someone that they know and trust. In Western Canada, we also, a complete line of products and services is important to farmers. And then we get a little bit into the agronomic side of things. So knowledgeable agronomist is coming in next, knows which products are best for my farm. And then we get into a few more attributes kind of in the middle of the importance. Takes responsibility for mistakes, guarantees their work. Convenient location comes up kind of right in the middle there. And then gets it done, keen to help, makes me feel valued as a customer. And now we start to get down a little bit more fast, efficient fertilizer service. The tech advice, that's actually provides advice about new technologies and agronomic practices. So again, tying in a little bit with the agronomics. And then we really start to see some of the attributes that fall towards the bottom. So they're really not as important for farmers in Western Canada. That's flexible payment terms, maintains contact when and how you want. Precision ag, that's actually experts in the use and adoption of precision ag. And that's one that we've been looking over the past couple years, and we really haven't seen it change. To date, when we look at the total market, that's not something that farmers believe is really high in importance when they're choosing an ag retailer to support. And finally, custom app. Custom app, reliable custom application. Not a lot of custom app in Western Canada, and thus, it falls really low on the importance scale. When we want to take a look at Eastern Canada, we find some similarities, certainly. Good prices, products available when needed, and people and trust really still are those top three attributes when they're looking for a retailer to support. Where it differs slightly is when it comes to complete line of products and services, not as important in Eastern Canada. And then when we get into some of the attributes, I believe, that surround custom application. So we can see custom application, reliable custom app was at the bottom for Western Canada, and it moves up a little bit in importance, not too much, but it does move up a little bit in importance. But what is most important is that the attributes surrounding some of that custom application. So gets it done on time, keen to help, guarantees their work, takes responsibility for mistakes, and even knowledgeable agronomists in knowing which products are best for your farm. So some of those attributes that are more to do a little bit with custom application and the agronomic services are a little bit more important in Eastern Canada, and that's one of the differences that we see between East and West. Okay, so that was what's important to farmers. That's the whole market, so that's giving a sense of what's important to farmers across varying sizes of farmers and such. Now we want to take a look and understand not all farmers are alike. How can we understand the differences between them? And so this is when we get into our segmentation. So we've got three different segments in Western Canada. We're going to focus just on the middle segment right now. We've got agronomic advice right here. And so our agronomic advice segment, what we see is good prices, offering good prices and products available when needed is still very important to this segment, but just as important is that they have people they can trust. They have knowledgeable agronomists. This is a big one right here, knowledgeable agronomists, and they know which products are best for a farm. So that's really a big one, as far as farmers in Western Canada that belong to that agronomic advice segment. They want to know that and even something as such as providing technical advice is important. So they want people they trust to provide the right agronomic advice for their farm, important to them. If we look at the next segment, I'll just take these ones off for a minute. But if we look at the next segment, and we can see that we've got price and credit over on the right-hand side. And what the price and credit segment is, I believe it's more truly that transactional grower. Price and credit segment wants good prices with flexible payment terms. And so that's where we see flexible payment terms. Not important to most of the segment, but when it comes to this, more transactional segment, we do see that flexible payment terms is very important. And then the final segment here I want to focus on is actually the first one here, and that's price and convenience. And really I want to highlight that offering good prices, products available when needed is still very important. But how it differs from the price and credit segment or the more transactional grower is that people and trust is still just as important as is something like convenient location. So I look at this segment as it's important that they're doing business with someone local that they trust. But it's still got to be, again, good prices, products available when needed, important across all segments. We want to look at how big those size of the markets are. We can see that across the whole market, we've got the price and convenience segment, about 40% of the market. That true transactional grower is only about 20% of the market. One of the significant differences, if we look across provincially, is we do see the agronomic advice segment is the largest in Manitoba. And another thing to point out, a lot of people talk about the transactional farmer. It's more of a large grower, more of a big farm. This is differences here between crop acres. So small farmers, less than 2,000 acres. Large farmers, more than 4,000 acres, total farm acres. And we can see not a lot of difference between them as far as the percent transactional or in the price and credit segment. In Eastern Canada, we have somewhat similar. We have a similar agronomic advice segment that we see where, again, knowledgeable agronomists knows which products are best for your farm, and providing that technical advice, providing that right agronomic advice for their farm, that's very important to them. And in Eastern Canada, we find that even supersedes things like good prices and products available when needed. We have a product and price segment, which again is a little bit more about, a little bit more transactional, but has a bit of a service component to it in Eastern Canada. So, for instance, fast, efficient fertilizer service is important to this segment. As is even something like convenient location, more important to this segment than others. But trust is still very much important, as is price and product. We don't see in Eastern Canada that pop as far as payment terms being important. And the last difference that we see in Eastern Canada is, again, we have this segment where reliable custom application, so down here, is more important to this segment of growers, and as are the attributes that surround that reliable custom app, how it gets done. So guarantees their work, takes responsibility for mistakes, gets it done, keen to help, and the fact that they have those knowledgeable agronomists. So we really find in Eastern Canada we have this segment of growers that is more, is a little bit more concerned with their custom application and the job the retailer's doing, meeting their needs there. As far as the size of these segments, we find that in Eastern Canada, the largest segment is the product and price segment, and it's a little bit larger in Quebec. We find in particular a big difference between Ontario and Quebec is the size of the custom application segment. So it's over a third of farmers in Ontario and then just about 15% in Quebec. So quite a bit different there. So that was focused on what farmers tell us is important. So we actually asked them, tell us what's most important to you, what's least important when you're choosing an ag retailer support. The next analysis we do when we look at these attributes is actually do a correlation analysis. And correlation is we run all of these attributes and we correlate them against willingness to support. So how willing are you to support the retailer? The strongest correlation, so those values where we get closest to 1 up here, such as people you know and trust and makes you feel valued as a customer, those with the strongest correlations, that means that we see those attributes in those retailers that receive very high support ratings. So this is kind of like I like to think about it. This is what the actions of the farmers tell us is important. So the one part of it that is the farmer telling us, yes, this is important to me, and these strong correlations really tell us that their actions show us that it is actually very important to them that the retailers that they support have people they know and trust. They do know how to make them feel valued as a customer. And then some of these attributes as well. They get things done on time, keen to help. They know which products are best for my farm, right? They take responsibility for mistakes. They guarantee their work. Really what we see is the attributes with the strongest correlations are how you go about interacting with that farmer and not so much the actual products or services that you have available. So this chart I like. It combines the two kind of measurements that we just looked at. So decision-making factors, so we get the factors that are of most highest importance are up at the top. So we've got good prices, offers good prices, and products available when needed. And along the right-hand side, or along the bottom, here we have things going towards the right-hand side of the chart that are most strongly correlated with willingness to support, right? Strongest correlation values. So I've highlighted trust here. And this is where I want to, kind of draw your attention to that, to think about do I have people that my customers know and trust at my location? Because what we know is that farmers say it's important to them, and we also know it has the strongest correlation value with willingness to support. So this quote to me really sums it up, and then we're going to dig into trust a little bit more and some of the data we have on that. But if people like you, they'll listen to you. But if they trust you, they'll do business with you. And I think that's where we're going to get into some of that data. We'll show you a little bit more. But I think it's important that you can think about how to build that trusting relationship. So again, now a few other things, points to pull out of the study, and then we're going to kind of talk a little bit about how you can build and, at the same time, potentially erode trust. This slide looks at the impact of time knowing most important contact on trust ratings. So we asked farmers in the study, of those crop input retailers that you do business with and have done crop input business with in the last 3 years, tell us how long you have known your most important contact at that location. And what we found here is then we also then we charted and said, okay, those farmers up here in the blue who have known their most important contact more than 20 years, what percentage of them gave that retailer a high trust rating? So that's a 5 out of 5 on a scale from 1 to 5 on trust. And what we found is the majority. So over 50%, 53% in fact, of those farmers that had known their most important contact more than 20 years correspondingly gave a high trust. So if we go down here to the orange with less than 5 years, only 25%. So you kind of get, it's almost cut in half, the number of farmers who then say that, yes, I have a high trust. So, it's probably not surprising, but our data does prove the point in that it takes time to build trust. So things like employee turnover at your retail locations are going to have an impact on trust. The other one that's going to have an impact on trust is sales approach. So we asked respondents, again, who respondents who reported doing crop input business in the past 3 years with their retailer, thinking about your most important contact at the retailer when it comes to their approach to selling crop input. Does this person focus mostly on the technical features of the products and providing agronomic advice? That's up here in the green. Do they focus mostly on building strong personal relationships? In the dark blue. They focus mostly on delivering the best possible service here in the light blue, or do they focus mostly on pricing and programs? And so what we found is that the farmers who reported that their retailer their most important contact at the retailer focused mostly on products or pricing, a lower percentage of those farmers correspondingly then gave that retailer a high trust. So better chance in earning trust if your approach is kind of focused on the agronomic advice that you're providing or the service that you're delivering, as opposed to just the price of the product. So leading with price is not what's going to build trust. Okay, so a couple points on trust. The other thing that I wanted to kind of tie in here was, we talk about leading with agronomic advice as building trust, but what does that mean? And what can we kind of show? And a lot of times what comes with that is service delivery. So it's getting out there, and what I've talked about is getting your boots dirty, but it's really getting, crop scouting, fertility planning, soil sampling, doing some of those activities for the farmer that can then kind of lend you to be able to provide that agronomic advice. And so it's a cost to the business. And so we wanted to take a look at that and understand those agronomic service deliveries and why, I'm going to show you, I guess, from the data why I think it pays dividends to an ag retailer's business. So in Western Canada, we asked farmers, so this is all respondents in the survey, all 801, and we asked them how important is it for you to receive the following agronomic services from your crop input retailer. So this is actually getting them from the crop input retailer. And what we find is that if we take, if we add up number 5 and number 4, for instance, as far as extremely important and important, we really do see that the vast majority of farmers feel it is important for them to receive chemical recommendations from their retailer. But we also see the majority saying crop scouting, fertility planning, and even soil sampling. We're starting to see that there's still a significant percentage of farmers that are looking for those services from their retailer. And in Eastern Canada, we actually even see a higher percentage. So we see even more farmers, and by far the majority now that are expecting and looking for these services from their ag retailers. So it's one thing the farmers want it, that's important, but how is it going to pay dividends to an ag retailer's business? Well, that's when we look here at the impact. So one of the impacts that we wanted to look at was the impact of delivering the service and on the correspondingly the ability of the retailer to influence crop chemical purchase decisions. So again, up here in the dark blue, if the crop scouting is provided by the retailer, so these are farmers that said, yes, I received crop scouting from my retailer that I did business with, Correspondingly, 64% of them, so a pretty strong majority, are then saying that retailer has a strong influence over my crop chemical purchase decisions. And not surprisingly, and I don't have it here, but the data also proves that if a retailer has a strong influence, they will earn a greater share of that customer's crop chemical business as well. So I think it's important as a retailer to gain a position of influence. And one of the ways that we see it, we certainly see a connection between providing those services and then, earning that level of influence. And one other measurement, I guess, to look at, so that's influence, and one other measurement that we looked at as far as, if there's value in providing some of these services from a retailer, and we looked at loyalty. So here is the group that said that they received services from the retailer. So this could have been soil sampling, crop scouting. We didn't determine which service. They received one of those services in that list from the retailer. And we found that over a third of those farmers then were loyal. So that's on a scale from 1 to 10, that's a loyalty rating of 9 or 10. It means you'll continue to do purchases with that retailer. So it's a pretty strong indicator of loyalty. And what we found is that it is significantly different. We've got over a third here, and we only have 12% that are saying they're loyal to that retailer when they don't receive any services. So again, I think as a retailer, everyone's goal is to maintain a loyal customer base and hopefully to grow a loyal customer base. And so one of the ways that from our data it looks at is that is through service delivery. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of the data that's coming out of our Channel Power report again, and starts to give you a bit of a picture of what farmers want their ag retailer to know. So we talked about what was important to farmers. Primarily it's about table stakes, I would say, is a good example of, or a good way to frame it, is to think about offering good prices and products available when needed. You've got to have that product available, and it's got to be perceived to be at a good price. But coming in very quickly after that, I guess I would say, or very much an important skill after that, is people they know and trust. And but they do differ a little bit in what's important to them. So we see that in Western Canada, we do see that there is a segment of the population, and Eastern Canada actually, where agronomic advice is just as important as product and price. So they want to know that they have a trusted agronomist that's there on staff that can deliver them expertise and knows which products are best for their farm. That's very important to them when they're choosing an ag retailer. There also is kind of more of what we would think of as a transactional farmer, where it's product and price, and then things such as payment terms or convenient location that becomes more important. And then there's another segment that in Eastern Canada, it's kind of wrapped up in service delivery and custom application and the relationship that goes along with that. And as far as, things such as gets it done on time, keen to help. And in Western Canada, that segment is not so much tied to custom application, but I think it is tied a little bit more to the relationship. So again, product and price are very important. You got to have the product there when they need it, and it has to be at a good price. But then what's also important is that they have someone local that they can trust to purchase their products from. We talked about trust then. We talked a little bit about building and eroding trust, and then also, I guess, why some of the reasons why I think service delivery and agronomic service delivery and having that approach, agronomics first, can pay dividends to your business as a retailer. So I hope you enjoyed that today. That's about all I have for you. I've put up my email address here and my phone number. Please feel free. If you have any questions afterwards, feel free to contact me. And that's all I have for you today.
Great. Thanks so much, Krista, for that information. There's certainly some pieces there that we can pull out and hone in on, such as employee retention and building trust with farmers, as well as understanding how your sales and service team approach farmers. At this point, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box, and I'll make sure Krista has a chance to respond. One of the ones that came in earlier is what are some of the things an ag retailer can do to build trust?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I think I'm going to, just go back, I think, to a couple slides here, and at least, and probably one of the biggest things I believe is having consistency in the people and in the relationships that you have at the ag retailer. I think it's we see that, again, going back to this slide and this data that we showed, it takes time to build trust. So when, as a retailer, if you have a lot of churn or a lot of new people coming into sales roles on a consistent basis, the farmers will feel that. They won't be able to establish a relationship, and it's very difficult to establish trust without really having time to know someone. So I think that that's really important, is that you think about, your employee plan, I guess I would say, and how you can minimize employee turnover. And then, on top of that was the next one as far as approach. And, whether it be delivering the best possible service or taking an agronomic, first type approach, I think both of those approaches in our data show that that's the highest trust ratings. Farmers gave retailers the highest trust ratings, the highest percentage of farmers gave their retailer high trust rating when they had that approach to purchasing crop inputs, or to sales of crop inputs. I think leading with price is probably the one thing that's going to erode trust more than anything. I think farmers that tends to not have that same ability to build trust in that relationship. Hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of a answer.
Yes, and that also leads into the next question that we have here. How would farmers readily accept a new crop advisor in their area? Do you have any perspective on that?
That's a tough one. I don't know if I have any specific data in regards to acceptance, right? I mean, unfortunately, I do come back to the previous slide and the fact that, I do know that our data shows it takes time to build trust, but that doesn't necessarily say that, farmers aren't open to a new face. And so the other thing I guess I would look at is that I think farmers, from our data anyways, they are looking for, in particular, a certain segment of farmers, that agronomic advice segment, they are looking for people that can provide that technical expertise to them, people that know which products are best for your farm, and people that are knowledgeable agronomists. So if you come from a place where you're very knowledgeable and you have that ability to be able to take that knowledge and apply it on farm for them, I think that can quickly, hopefully build trust and rapport with the farmer.
Great. No, that makes a lot of sense. And Tim here asks, did the survey ask for information on size, acres, or yearly purchase volumes of respondents? And do the size of customers change the factors they value? For instance, one respondent could be 200 acres and one could be 20,000 acres.
Yeah, no, great point, Tim. I kind of tried to touch base on that, but I may have missed it here. Let me just go back here to the Western Canadian data. So one of the things that we do is we do ask what's their total crop size. So in this particular chart that you're looking at now, is you can see in Western Canada we broke the total respondents. So we broke the 800 respondents up into those that had farms that were less than 2,000 in total acres, and the large segment was then more than 4,000 in total acres, and the medium was right in between. And then we wanted to understand whether or not there was differences in the percentage of respondents that fell into each decision-making segment. So that's where we look at these are the price and convenience. This is the trusted local guy that's looking for that trusted local guy. Agronomic advice, obviously looking for the agronomic advice, and the price and credit segment being more transactional. So if we look at those as being the differences in how farmers approach, what we saw in the data is that, from a transactional standpoint, not a lot of differences in the percentage of farmers falling into each category. Probably the biggest difference that we see is the difference between the percent of respondents in the medium-sized farms, so those with total farm acres from 2,000 to 4,000 acres. We had 45% of them were in this category looking for the trusted local rep, right? The trusted local farmer, the trusted local retailer. And we see that drop off. So we see almost a 10% drop off to just around 35% here of the large farmers. So that's probably, that I would say is a significant difference. And we also see then conversely that the agronomic advice segment actually grows and gets a little bit bigger when you get larger. So, which is, I think, a good thing for retailers. So some differences, some small, but certainly not big differences when we look at size of farm.
Okay, and then another question that came in is, did the study review if there is a difference with agronomic services being charged by the acre versus included in the product price?
We did measure that, so I don't have that in part of these slides. So when we asked, we did measure in both Western and Eastern Canada. After asking farmers if it was important for them to receive those services, we actually then asked them if they received those services from their retailer, and we looked at whether they paid for those services or didn't pay for those services. I would say, as a kind of an overarching statement, I would say that most farmers do pay for soil sampling, or the majority would pay for soil sampling, and the majority would not pay for their other services from their ag retailer. When we looked at Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I jumped the gun.
Yeah, no worries. I just was going to make one other comment about service delivery, and that's the independent agronomic consultants. And they are obviously in this providing this agronomic expertise or this agronomic service as well. And we did ask and measure the number of users number of farmers that are using their services, and those were paid for services. So we do see that is a significant, over a third of farmers in Western Canada are using those services from a paid for agronomic consultant that's not associated with the retailer. But we didn't necessarily see that they are paying for those services from a retailer themselves. So.
Okay, great. And based on your background and your knowledge of Eastern Canada versus Western, why do you think the services aspect increases in value for Eastern Canada in comparison to Western?
No, great question, Julie. I think I'll just flip ahead to those slides again so we can see that. But, I think, myself personally, I believe that one of the differences that we see between Eastern Canada and Western Canada is that there is more. The retailer is more involved in the application of the products that they're selling. So whether that be fertilizer or crop chemicals, there is more custom application services that are happening in Eastern Canada as compared to Western Canada. And so I think a lot of these services do lend themselves and kind of to also going with the custom application. So for instance, if I'm applying the crop chemical as a retailer, there's a good chance that that the farmer is going to want me to go out there and scout that field and decide and work together with him to decide what products. Whereas in Western Canada, as a farmer, I'm doing the application myself, so I can make the decision on which products that I want to sell, and it's not necessarily as closely tied. I think that service delivery. That's my opinion. We didn't specifically ask that from a data perspective, but in my opinion, I think that's one of the differences as why you would see the service delivery being more important in Eastern Canada.
No, super. Thanks for sharing that. It was something that caught me by surprise a little bit. So let's see here. I think that wraps it up for today's webinar. I want to take a moment and thank Krista of Stratus Ag Research for joining us and sharing her expertise. And again, I'd like to thank our sponsors for their support: Bayer CropScience, Canterra Seeds, FP Genetics, SeCan, Syngenta, and 2020 Seed Labs. Also, we welcome any feedback and input you might have, which can be sent to me at jdeering@issuesinc.com. Thanks for your time, and we hope you'll join us for our next webinar. I'm Julie Deering, and this is a Germination Strategy Session.